Hello and welcome to this bite-sized webinar series by the compliance people. Today I'll be talking to you about special waste consignment notes in Scotland. My name is Kerry Hammick and I'm a consultant with the compliance people, and I'll be going through everything you need to know about special waste consignment notes. More specifically, we will cover the basic duties under the Special Waste Regulations 1996, the information that's required on a special waste consignment note, how to correctly complete a special waste consignment note, and the pre-notification requirements and exemptions. So let's start by going over the Special Waste Regulations 1996. If you produce, transport or receive special waste, or hazardous waste as it's also known, you'll be regulated by the Special Waste Regulations 1996. These specify that mixing special waste with any other waste, whether or not it's special or hazardous, is banned. You're required to complete a consignment note for each transfer of special waste, and you must keep records of these for a minimum of 3 years. The duty of care still applies, so that's under the Environmental Protection Duty of Care Scotland regulations, and that means that you still have to send your waste with a registered carrier and send it to a permitted site or a site that has an exemption. We'll also be going through what consignees are, as consignees must send completed consignment notes to the Scottish Environment Protection Agency, or SEPA, following each consignment. The consignee is the recipient of the waste. After every consignment received, they must send a completed special waste consignment note to SEPA. This allows SEPA to track what hazardous waste was sent to them and how it was disposed of or recovered. So let's go through an overview of the requirements. You need to have a description of the waste, any processes the waste has been through, how the waste is contained and or packaged, the quantity of the waste, so the weight, and the place and date of transfer. It needs to contain details of the permit, license or exemption of the person receiving the waste, the license or registration number of the person handing over the waste if applicable, so do they have a waste management license, environmental permit or exemption, or are they a registered carrier of controlled waste? There must be the appropriate European Waste Catalogue or EWC code or codes included, and I'll explain a bit more about what these are later. And also signatures to confirm that the information on the note has been checked and that it's correct. I'm going to go over these each in more detail later on, as I appreciate it's quite a comprehensive list. But the law is very specific about what special waste consignment notes must contain, so it's really important that nothing is missed. Also, auditors really love checking these notes, so it's important that everything is right. Each special waste consignment note must have a unique consignment note code on it, which can be purchased from SEPA. You can also purchase the actual special waste consignment note from SEPA, so that's the Scottish Environment Protection Agency, or you can create your own. However, if you do this, it must include all of the information set out in Schedule 1 of the Special Waste Regulations 1996, and it must follow as close to that format as possible and still include the unique consignment code purchased from SEPA. It's recommended that you check with SEPA if you do plan to use your own format of consignment note, so that they can confirm that all the required information is there. The Special Waste Consignment Note has 5 parts, and that's parts A to E, and they're required for every movement of special waste. Each part of the note must be filled out in order by the right person at the right time, and you must correctly classify the waste, and a good way to do this is if you use Technical Guidance WM3, which I'll go on to explain later. The note must be prepared before the waste is moved, and pre-notification of special waste is usually required. However, movements of special waste to sites and from sites that are in Scotland do not require you to pre-notify SEPA. It's only sites that are outside of Scotland that have this requirement. The waste will be rejected by the receiving site if it has been incorrectly coded, so it's important that you get this right. A bit more detail about pre-notification then. As I said, it's not required for movements of special waste between sites in Scotland, and this is because SEPA has adopted a regulatory position regarding the requirement to pre-notify for movements of special waste in Scotland. Essentially, they won't take enforcement action when a copy of the special waste consignment note is not supplied to SEPA before special waste is removed from premises where it's being held, provided that the place where it's being moved from and the destination are both located in Scotland. To pre-notify, you need to complete parts A and B of the pre-notification sheet of a consignment note, and this must be sent to SEPA at least 72 hours, but not more than 1 month before the special waste is moved out of or imported into Scotland. There are some exemptions from the need to pre-notify, and these exemptions will apply if you regularly produce and transport the same type of waste, going to the same disposal and/or recovery facility. You only need to pre-notify SEPA of the first consignment in any 1 year, provided that you refer to the number of the initial pre-notification in all subsequent special waste consignment notes. If your business operates on a number of sites and you transport your special waste to a site that you own that holds a relevant license, permit or exemption to receive the waste, then you will not need to pre-notify SEPA. Also, if you return faulty products or materials as hazardous or special waste to the supplier or manufacturer, you do not need to pre-notify. And the same applies if your consignment only contains lead-acid vehicle batteries. It's important to remember, though, that all these movements must still have a special waste consignment note with them, even if you don't need to pre-notify SEPA. So this is what a special waste consignment note looks like, and this template is available on SEPA's website and should be used or replicated to ensure that all the necessary information is included if you do decide to create your own consignment note. So you must use SEPA issued special waste consignment notes or template to ensure that the required fields are met. And you probably noticed, if you deal with waste, that the consignment note here has a lot more detail on it compared to a waste transfer note. And it's the duty of each person in the chain to check that each section is completed before them, and you have to sign on the note to say that this has been done. Each movement of waste is called a consignment, hence the term consignment note. So we'll now go through the different parts of the consignment note. So the first part, part A, is to be completed by the consignor. So this is the person who causes the waste to be removed, and this can be the producer or the holder, or an agent acting with authority from the waste producer or holder of the waste. It's usually the waste producer or holder. And there's usually 4 copies, but this can change depending on who's collecting the waste and where it's going, and all copies must be given to the waste carrier. So to clarify, this part should be produced by the waste producer or holder, and it should include a unique consignment note code, and there's a special way to get this, which I'll explain on the next slide, because it's really important this code is correct. It needs to have the name, address, telephone number and email address of where the waste is to be removed from, and also the name and address of where the waste is to be taken to. It also needs to include the name, address, telephone number and email address of the producer if this is different to where the waste is to be removed from. So now let's look at consignment note codes in a bit more detail. Consignment note codes are unique codes which are issued from SEPA and consist of 2 letters, SA, SB or SC, and a series of numbers. So for example, it might look like SA 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The codes can be purchased from SEPA, and they can be purchased from one of the local offices or online at the website that's shown on the screen here. SA codes are £15 each and used for all other types of consignment not listed under SB or SC, which we'll talk about now. So SB codes are £10 each, and these are used for the consignment of special waste which consists only of lead-acid motor vehicle batteries. SC codes are free, but are restricted to the second or subsequent removal of waste within a succession of extended carriers collection rounds, the return of out of specification materials which are waste to the original manufacturer, and the removal of waste from a ship to a conveyance or reception facility. So only these 3 points are free. The next section is Part B, and this is completed by the consignor, so the person who's causing the waste to be removed. And on this bit, we need the description of the process that created the waste. We need waste details, so this includes a description. So, for example, fluorescent tubes. We need the EWC European Waste Catalogue code, the quantity of the waste, so this might be in kilograms, litres or tonnes, depending on what it is, the colour, the container type and amount. We need waste details, so any chemical or biological components and the concentrations of these, for example, mercury, and these can be identified on the safety data sheet. We need the physical form of the waste, so is it a gas, liquid, powder, sludge, or is it mixed? And we need the hazard codes, which can be found in WM3 Appendix C. The hazardous property assessment should help establish the hazard code in Appendix C of WM3, but there are 3 methods to work out if a waste displays hazardous properties. These are calculation, so this refers to a concentration limit for a hazard statement code or codes. The second is testing to prove whether a particular hazardous property is present or not, and this is typically used for the physical properties, so explosive, oxidizing, or perhaps flammable. And the third way is through looking at the safety data sheet if the waste is of the same chemical composition. If a product or waste has a hazard pictogram, then a hazardous property is likely to apply, but the absence of one doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't need one, so it's worth checking. Often, the hazardous waste contractor will help you fill out this section, but it's your responsibility to make sure that it's correct. So, as promised, we will now talk a bit more about WM3 Technical Guidance. This has been produced by the various regulators in the United Kingdom, including SEPA, as a technical guidance document to provide guidance on waste classification. It's essentially a comprehensive reference manual for anyone who's involved in producing, managing, or regulating waste. And the key bit is Appendix A, because this includes the waste classification codes. These can also be referred to as the LOW, List of Waste, or EWC, European Waste Catalogue codes for hazardous and non-hazardous waste. This document doesn't provide guidance on the packaging or labelling of waste for transport, so it's important to bear this in mind as you might need to go elsewhere to find these details. Word of warning, it's 185 pages long, so it's a bit of a hefty nighttime read, but the key bit, as I said, is Appendix A, so you need to try and remember this bit. It can be quite complicated to use, as there's a particular way it should be read and an order in which you need to check the chapters in Appendix A. Unfortunately, this is beyond the scope of our training today, but the key thing to know is the common waste codes for your site or your business, and you can find most of these in the link on the slide here, and that's on the Environment Agency website. It is better, however, to use the full list in WM3, as that way you can make sure that you're definitely classifying your waste correctly. So when we identify waste using waste codes, we want to know exactly what the waste is and where it's come from. And we do this using a 6-digit code, and it lists the waste according to industrial process or business activity. So the list of wastes, or the European Waste Catalogue, contains 20 chapters that relate either to a process that generated the waste or to a specific waste type. And the chapters are each given a 2-digit number. So, for example, as you can see here, Chapter 20 is municipal wastes. So this is household waste and similar commercial, industrial and institutional wastes. And this is quite a common one that's used in a lot of businesses. It's important to bear in mind that hazardous waste codes have an asterisk. So for example, 130507 asterisk. If that wasn't there, then it would be non-hazardous waste. So it's important to make sure that when you're using hazardous waste codes, they've got the asterisk there. Another common chapter that's often used is Chapter 15, because this is waste packaging, absorbent, wiping cloths, filter materials, and protective clothing not otherwise specified. So it's important to get yourself familiar with which chapters and which codes are relevant to you and your business. We'll move on to Part C of the Special Waste Consignment Note now, and this is completed by the waste carrier when they've checked that Part A and Part B are correct. In this part, we need to have the name, address and vehicle details of the waste carrier. We need to have their registration number for their waste carrier's license or any reason that they're exempt from this. We need to have the quantity of the waste collected, and this part needs to be signed, dated and the time recorded by the waste carrier. After this is done, the waste carrier will take the waste away and they should leave you with a note. So you need to have a copy of the special waste consignment note, but Part E will not yet be completed. Next is Part D. So this is again completed by the consignor, so the person who's caused the waste to be removed, when they've checked parts A, B and C, and this person must be present when the waste is collected. On this section, it needs to have the name and the address of the consignor, so this is where the waste is being collected from, and it needs to have the signature from them and the date. One copy should be kept by the consignor and the other copies should be given to the carrier. The last section of the special waste consignment note is Part E, and this part is completed by the site accepting the waste, and this is known as the consignee. So in this part, it needs to have the address of the site receiving the waste, the date and time that the waste was received. The consignee will confirm the EWC codes and the waste quantities, so are they as they've been recorded on the note. Need to include the type of waste operation or operations, for example, are they going to landfill? And it needs to have the relevant waste permit or exemption number. Needs to include the registration of the vehicle that's bringing the waste onto the site, and then the consignee needs to put their name, sign and date Part E. The consignee must also then send a completed copy of the consignment note back to SEPA. Finally then, to recap, on a special waste consignment note, in Part A, we need to have the location of the waste, so where it's been produced, and details of the producer or consignor, name, address and signature. Need to have the consignee address, so this is where the waste is being taken to. Need to have in Part B the waste description, the relevant EWC code or codes and relevant hazardous code or codes. In Part C, we need to have the waste carrier's name, address and carrier registration details. We need to have the date, time and signature for the collection of the waste and the vehicle registration of the waste carrier. In Part D, we need to have the consignor name, date, address and signature. And then in the last part, Part E, we need to have the consignee name and the site name of where the waste is being sent to, the address and their permit or exemption number and details. And then finally, we need to have the date, time and signature for when the waste was delivered. So the consignee needs to sign. Thank you very much for listening. If you do have any questions about the webinar, then please get in touch with us at the Compliance People. If you found the webinar useful, then we have lots of other webinars and other resources available, and these are on our website, thecompliancepeople.co.uk. Thank you.